Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Carolina Cup 2011.
I've been firing guns for about 48 years. I'm 53 years old. Started off on a rifle team when I was a little kid. Won my first gun when I was about 12 years old. Lucky enough to be sponsored by Smith & Wesson since the early 90s. My full-time job, I'm a consultant contractor for Smith & Wesson doing special events all over the country. So basically I get paid to fire guns and meet nice people all over the country. I'm really, really lucky to do what I do.
Thank you, Slide Hammer. Even though I'm retired now, I served 23 years. I retired in June of 2003. I spent 19 of the 23 years in the Army Special Forces with a primary focus and involvement in anti-terrorism and counterterrorism type operations.
Okay, Dave, when you're ready, pick up the log and give me a nod. Shooter is ready. Stand by. Cover.
Okay, first stage of the match. Got into the match, made one mental error. What I didn't realize, I was third down in the stick. What I didn't realize is I should have got my gun out before I dropped the log, activating the two activators. Because I didn't have time to get onto the right target. Everything else went smooth right up until the point I moved a little too aggressively to the rear of the vehicle, and I went down on my left knee. Probably lost about a second and a half to get stabilized on the next target. But otherwise, good first stage of the match.
Well, right now there's about 48 states that have concealed carry permits. So anytime you buy a gun, you really shouldn't just buy it, put ammo in it, figure you're good to go. You really need to go out, fire the gun, one, see if it works, sight it in, get comfortable with it. So if you ever need to really use it, you know how it works and what to expect from it. In IDPA, you can do that. You can go out, we make everyone feel comfortable. If you've never done this before, we mentor you up with somebody. We just did that with Mike Talbert this weekend. I mentored him through the weekend, make sure he's up to speed on what he needed to know as far as the safety rules and how everything worked. And it's a great organization. We want people to be involved, and the more the better as far as IDPA is concerned.
I'm 29. I've been a full-time cop pretty much since I was 21. And this is a sport, but I look at it very realistically too. I mean, I'm a cop. I've been on a SWAT team. I pointed guns at people. I've seen a little bit of the real thing, and I admire the people like that in this world. The cops or the military, the people that have seen the elephant. And I've wanted to kind of be that person. They make movies about these guys, the real guys, the real men in real life. Nobody knows who their names are. But they make movies about people like that. And I don't know, I just always thought that was really cool.
Tell me when you're ready. Shooter's ready. Stand by.
Thank you. Too bad. Doing a little better today. In that one, for instance, I wanted to make sure I sat as far forward in the chair as I could, so when I swung to that first target, I cleared the no shoot, and I had room for that. So just a lot of little things like that, anything to save you tenths of seconds or whatnot. Because a lot of stuff is outside of just shooting. You have your time in shooting, but then all this other time that you have moving and reloading and the positions, that's just huge. You have a lot of time there, so it all adds up.
I got my pistol permit back in 1981. My IDPA number is 11.
Is the shooter ready? Stand by.
So I was one of the first ones to come on board with IDPA. I've been competing since they started doing state and national matches. But I would say I probably started really taking it seriously the last 7 years, and one of the people that I can really give a lot of credit to is Tommy Yost. Since I've known him, he's been one to bring out the best in me and keep pushing me forward to be better and better and better.
Stand and hold.
That was a nice stage. There was a lot of movement within the chair you had to do. I made a mistake. I went to the first target, then to the second one, and I swept past the target I was supposed to engage and had to come back to it. I had a great time, but it would have been even better if I didn't have a little bit of a brain mishap and knew the sequence of the targets. But other than that, I'm real happy with the outcome.
I've been around guns all my life, but I've never this kind of level with handguns is pretty challenging. So it's been great. I've really learned a lot. My team, I'm lucky to have these guys to shoot with because they're just unbelievable. They're all great guys, and they all help you with pointers and this and that. And the other day when we first started, I was shaking like a leaf. I couldn't get, man, I tell you, I was nervous. And once I shot, everything went from here down, and I just.
Shooter is ready. Stand by.
Scared to death. First time. Never done this.
Cover. Back up to it. There you go.
Shaking like a leaf. Nerves of steel. I got rid of the first one, so I'm feeling much better. Took a couple of deep breaths. I've never done this before. It's a lot of fun, and I recommend everybody do this. This is once you get the first one out. But it's just that, you know, you're so much stuff you got to think about. So many things you got to do here. It's not like being in Miami Vice. I'll tell you that.
Unload and show clear, please. Slide, hammer, and holster.
But I think everybody should do this. I think this is you know, I saw some kids out here. I've seen a lot of ladies out here. It's a great thing. IDPA is really a lot of fun.
Shooter ready.
Well, for me, I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, so when that buzzer goes off and I have to move and shoot, and it's all under time, and I'm really trying to aim and hit and get good points, that for me is just such a big rush. I just love it so much. This is one of the only sports in the world where you can come up and meet the world champions, and they will talk to you, and they'll answer questions for you, and they'll help you out, and in this sport, my closest competitor would lend me her gun if mine broke. You know, you can't say that of anything else. So the community and the people out here are above measure.
I got into shooting about 2.5 years ago. I started a little local IDPA match. So I just started shooting from there. And now I'm at, I shoot almost every single weekend, you know. I love it. I shoot IDPA and USPSA whenever I get a chance to. Actually, a friend of mine invited me down to a little IDPA shoot every week down at a local shooting range, and from there we created a passion. I actually have a running mate, that I call it. A person that we always shoot together. We're always giving each other tips and hints, and we're real tight. The shooting community in general is pretty tight. I had a gun problem today, and I was able to go to a fellow shooter and borrow a gun. How many other places are you going to find, hey, can I borrow your $1,000 gun? Yeah, sure, go and take it, have fun.
It's a sport that anybody can participate in. It doesn't take a whole lot. It doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take, specific training. Anybody can pick it up and just play.
It's always good to get the first stage out of the way. Went pretty well for me. When I ran to the back of the car, I did stumble there off balance. I kind of had to catch myself, so that cost me, maybe a second, 3/4 of a second or something like that. But first stage, I was clean, down all zeros, pretty smooth time, and it was good.
I love this sport because it's an individual sport. Every match I go to, I'm shooting against myself. I am the only one that can crash and burn a match. I cannot blame it on anybody else. It's totally on me what it is.
Nice.
You always want to make sure you cap your magazines off, make sure that they're all up to where they're supposed to be before you even get involved in the next stage. So it's one less thing you got to worry about when you go to the line.
You'll have this backpack on. Starting position, foot just to the left of the center block, squared up on the stump in front of me. You can turn your head to look at the targets, but what I don't want is your body turned. Body squared up here, your head can be looking at the targets. There are 3 targets on this upper tier. They all need to be shot while moving, including the first one.
I like to stress the safety anytime I'm talking to somebody new. Nobody has a loaded pistol until they're at the line and ready to shoot, and they're under the command of the safety officer. They've already been briefed on the stage and what they're going to do. They're asked if they understand the course of fire, and at that time, you can load and make ready.
That target must be the first target you engage. As you notice, there's tape on the tree over there. That's your 180. If you get a little bit too far forward and turn this gun in on that target, you're going to be shooting down there where you just came from. Okay? So starting position with the backpack on, buzzer, start moving. Minimum of 2, 2, and 2.
So as soon as you feel comfortable in holstering a loaded weapon and drawing a loaded weapon, you can probably start competition. You'll find people are very friendly and are helpful. Here, when I started, people would ask me if I wanted advice because they understand new shooters can easily be overwhelmed.
This is a shoot 'em as you see 'em stage. The first target that you see is the one down between the V's in the tree. There are 2 more targets out there. No movement is required in here. This is the end of the line for you. You cannot come past here. You can run here and stop. You can shoot while moving if you so choose. It doesn't matter. However you get here, that has to be the first target you engage when you get into this group of 3. The other 2 targets are equal threats. I don't care what order you engage them in.
Everyone I've ever taken has had an unbelievable adrenaline rush after that first stage. It's unbelievably exciting, and I've never had anyone come to a match that didn't say they didn't want to do it again.
Okay, for this course of fire, went real smooth for me. The balance of speed and accuracy while moving was there, and a good, hard, clean slide lock load at the tail end of it. Cleaned it up nice. Real strong stage for me.
That stage went really well. I knew that I had time to do a tactical reload after shooting the 3rd target before I had engaged the 4th. So what I did is actually reload it and move to the next shooting position, so I was able to perform 2 things at once, which cut my time down drastically. My hits were only good. I only dropped 1 point for the entire stage, so I'm real happy with it.
Ready, stand by.
If a person is concerned, interested in concealed carry, he can do this and he can use the exact same gear that he would want to carry in his day-to-day, and you can still be competitive in this sport. So it gives you a great opportunity to practice with your gear, run your gear, and see if it is going to work for you.
I think sometimes a large match like this, if you're a brand new shooter, you might want to get a little bit more practice, you know, in gun control and gun handling and stuff like that. But other than that, you know, it's a pretty wide open range of shooters, and that's why we like this kind of match, because it can bring in a lot of different ranges, and they can all have a lot of fun and all compete.
Our first comment to a newer shooter is always be safe, have fun, and shoot your game. If you can do those 3 things and you leave and you've had a good time, We've done our job, and we hope you'll come back. With competitive shooting, just as we're all individual shooters, each individual shooter has to shoot their own match. You may try to shoot Bob Vogel's match, and you'll find out you're not Bob Vogel. Each individual shooter has to shoot their own match, and the benefit of that is they're doing it safely, and the acceleration and the accuracy will come with practice and time.
We're all here for one reason today, and that is to make sure we can help you be successful. That's our goal. Before we start, I do want to mention our sponsor for this stage is CompTac. Our sponsor for the next stage will be GlockTriggers.com. I want to encourage you, if you can, to support our sponsors. They do an awful lot for us all over the country for IDPA, giving us lots of prizes to give away to shooters, helping our matches be successful. So next time you're ready to make a purchase, we hope you can support our sponsors, all right? We're going to shoot you today first in stage 3, everybody as a group, then we'll move you over to stage 4. I'll do the brief now for stage 3, and we'll take you to 4 in a little bit, and we'll do another brief at that point. This is a 12-round Vickers count stage. Shoot till you're happy. While your book says that concealment is required, we are not requiring it on this stage, okay? Your start position will be seated here in the driver's seat, both hands on the steering wheel, foot on the gas. Your gun will be in the IDPA box on the floor inside the van. We'll give everybody a chance to look at that here in just a moment. The gun starting position will be with a mag in the gun, but no round in the chamber. So when we load you up a little bit later, make sure you've got 10 rounds in your ESP and SSP mags and 8 rounds in your CDP mag. Revolver shooters, you shoot as normal. All right, we'll put that in the box, facing downrange, lid is closed. All magazines that you will use on this stage will be beside the box on the floor, all right? So on the start signal, sitting here in the driver's seat, you will turn, take a knee behind the IDPA box, retrieve your firearm, put it in working condition, and then you'll engage all targets with 2 rounds each in tactical priority. The tactical priority in this stage starts with the target back here to the left of the van in front of you. You'll see it when you look through the van. That will require 2 shots. Behind that target is a piece of steel, which will then activate a double drop turner just outside the driver's window. So if you'll all get in a position where you can see that, we'll give you a quick look at it. Bang! Pretty straightforward. Also notice that magically the rear door opens up on the van in front of you. That's because there are 2 bad guys inside that wish to do you harm. So your next 3 targets will be 2 of them that are inside the van and the one that is here out to the right. Those can be shot in any order. There is no priority. You can shoot them in any order you would like to. However, there is a target all the way down in front for T6. That must be the last target you engage. So your priority again, T1 here to the left, T2 right outside the passenger window, and the final priority is all the way in the back. So 3 in the middle, shoot in any order. Any questions?
They all gotta be from the knee in here?
All from inside the van on at least 1 knee. You can use 2 if you'd like, I don't care. You stay behind the IDPA box for the entire stage.
3 there, any order, the one in the back, last.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody gets a minimum of 2.
First time, never done this before.
No problem. We'll get you taken care of, man.
I'm right back in this thing, and it's like, he said, you know, it's not hard and everything, but for a new shooter, first time guy, it's challenging. It is challenging, especially at 5 to 8 on a Saturday morning. I don't get up before noon.
For the first stage of the day, I'm really happy. I think I got a decent time, but the main thing is, I was all down 0, wasn't I on that?
Sure
yep. So
that,
I came out, cleaned up my accuracy because I thought it was a little sloppy yesterday. I'm in the groove today.
Yeah,
we're ready to go.
Here, brother.
Ready, stand by.
To start the course, I split my thumb on the door. A little bit of a distractor, but the course of fire went extremely well for me. Good positioning inside the van. I shot it clean. No worries. Real strong stage for me. Good start for the morning. 16-16 clean.
Next shooter. Climb on in, take a knee. Bob, take a knee. Nobody else got to do that, please. Mags alongside the box. Magazines alongside the box.
I'll get there, man.
Robert, you shooter. Ron's on deck. Not yet. Relax. Relax. I'm sorry. Shooters ready. Stand by. Load, show me clear. Slide forward, hammer, and holster. Thank you. Say! 10-41. Who's my next shooter? What's up, bud? Go on, grab your knee. Zero here. Magazines on, please. Mags alongside the box. Okay.
That was a great one.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Pretty good run there. 10-4 down zeros. Just trying to be smooth so I can, you know, keep it a pace I can do this all day. I'm happy with that, though. It's good.
Guys, we're here today on the Miami Vice set. Very exciting, isn't it? You can hear gunfire in the background.
Correct.
See?
Yeah.
Like right on cue, gunfire. Anyway, what happens in this scene is that the original limousine driver is supposedly in the head. And so the bad guy shooter takes over the limo. The two other bad guys, the real bad guys, get in the back. The Jim Zubiana was the man who did the scene. Gets out of the car, puts them in it, picks up a shotgun, shoots them in the back seat. Then the original limousine driver comes running up with a pistol and he sings, "Freeze! Freeze! Freeze!" But what he doesn't understand is Jim goes like this, and then when the bad guy takes his eyes off of him, he does the Mozambique drill and drills him 5 times. And finished, he does this, and he walks up and sets it on the bad guy's chest, who's now dead. That's it. It's all speed and accuracy, I guess, with this deal. Any questions?
Where were you during that?
I then come running in, the best part of the show. I then come running in with my Browning High Power. And then they went to commercial, we all went home. Okay, any questions?
That's why
it ain't 5 times.
How many?
2 to the body, 1 to the head.
Oh, is that what it was? Yeah. Well, I wasn't there. See, I was running up when they actually shot it. Thanks a lot, Tom, for correcting me.
I was about to do that in the middle of there, but I didn't.
You're another one. Slap you people. Okay, anyway, that's it, so have fun.
Let's go shoot it.
Shooter indicates ready. Stand by. If finished, unload, show clear. Slide, hammer, and are you going to shoot it again?
My time.
274.
Yeah.
Down 5. Unload, show clear, and holster. Range is clear. 311. Down 0.
0, got it.
Well, 308's the time to beat. That's
I had to take a
311.
pause there.
That's 311.
I know what I did wrong.
Hundreds of us.
I got some money.
Unload, show clear. Slide, hammer, and
Want the gun?
I'll take the gun.
Done for now.
Right. Range is clear. Time 285 clean.
285?
285 down 0. That is not going to last long. Look at the
I know.
competition level here. Come
I know.
on.
It should be better. It should be about 2. But,
With all of the guys with these cool shirts, they've got to be better than 285.
yeah, they probably will be.
Hey, Bob, I'll give you $10 to shoot it again.
Nice one.
I need to shoot it again. Who's taking the money anyways? Okay. We'll see how long it holds up. I'm going to have to stick around.
Shooter in the catch ready. Stand by. If finished, unload, show clear. Slide, hammer, and I'll take it from you. Thank you. Range is clear. 3, 3, 3. Down 1. Nice run. If finished, unload, show clear. Slide, hammer, and I'll take it from you. Shooters ready. Stand by. If finished, unload, show clear. Slide, hammer, and I'll take it from you. Range is clear. Time 292.
Down 5.
Down 5. He had it. So close. Shooters ready. Stand by. If finished, unload, show clear. Are you shooting twice? Yeah. Okay. You can holster. Range is clear. Time 297. Down 5. Okay, Bob, 1 foot back up on the chair. Shooter in the cage ready. Stand by. If finished, unload, show clear. Slide. Hammer, and are you done? I'll take it. We are clear. Time 280.
Did you get it? Did you get it?
Down 0.
Oh man. Oh man.
Oh boy, oh boy. Shooters ready. Stand by. Slide. Hammer. And are you shooting again?
I'll hold that for now.
Okay. If you're done, then I'll just take it back. Range is clear. 253.
Wow.
Clean. Oh, and Mark's not here to get you back up on the table.
The scenario is you are backing your boat down into the lake early one morning when suddenly, and in the words of our illustrious match director, now the whales come upon you and wish you harm. Handle it. Your start position will be here at your boat, both feet facing the boat, strong hand on the line. On the start signal, you'll turn, then draw, and engage T1 and T2 with 2 rounds each in tactical sequence. 1, 2, 1. One of your children decides they need to help you. You realize very quickly that's probably not a good idea. So you will push your child to safety. When that happens, things happen downrange. So everybody want to watch? Pushing the child. You'll see that we have an out and back that comes out from behind the gas tank, or the gas pump. That target is your next threat and must be engaged before any of the other threats that you might happen to see out of the corner of your eye. All of the remaining targets must be engaged in tactical priority, near to far, the front boat and the back boat. The targets within each boat are equal distance from each other, so there is no priority within the boat, but you must engage front boat before rear boat, okay? The questions that have popped up over the last few days have been very similar to the one that Bob asked. Do I have to stand still? The answer is no. If you want to shoot it on the move, you can certainly do that. If you want to run all the way over here to the popper and push the popper down and engage them from here, that's fine. You can do that. If you want to turn, draw, shoot, run by the popper, hit the popper, take a knee, and take the out and back from a knee, you can do that as well. My only real requirement here is that A, you get tactical sequence on these two targets, B, you shoot these near to far, C, that you shoot the out and back before you shoot those, and all reloads must be done with one knee on the ground. Now for us folks that shoot automatics, that's not a real problem. For the revolver shooters, that's important. All right? All right, any other questions?
How do you pronounce that first photo?
I'm not going there. Finished. Unload and show me clear. I see clear. Slide forward. Pull trigger and holster. Range is safe. 14-13.
Thank you so much.
Shooter indicates ready. Stand by. All right, sir. Load show clear. I see clear. Slide forward, pull trigger, and holster. Range is safe. 1933.
0, 1.
0 in the back.
0 in the middle.
Gamble didn't pay off.
There you go. Thank
All
you.
right, appreciate it. Not a bad course. The gamble was moving into the position, and I thought I'd have time for the out and back target, but I didn't. So I dropped a few points on that, but otherwise solid.
Give me a nod when you're ready, sir. Shooter indicates ready. Stand by. Sir, load show clear. I see clear. Slide forward, pull the trigger, and holster. Range is safe. 11:55.
0, 0, 0, 0. 0 in the back.
That's good. Another good run. All zeros like over there. Did that pretty much to my abilities. So start off today with 2 stages like that. That's pretty sweet.
It looked like it the way
Did
you
it?
were right in front.
Yeah, I didn't.
Shooter indicates ready.
That's a blazing
Right.
transition then.
At the buzzer, step rearward off the box and engage each target with 2 rounds. I don't care if you step off backwards or left or right. Do not step off forward. After you've engaged these targets, you'll move to the clothesline, which is position 2, and engage the remaining targets in tactical priority with 2 rounds each. You'll slice the pie. There are 3 targets over there. There are 3 targets here. Total of 6. They get a minimum of 2 rounds each. Okay? Once you step off the box, there is no order on these 3 targets. You shoot them as you wish. Position 1 and position 2 are the only places you can do a reload.
Left, right, center.
Whoa, that's what you want to do. Definitely.
Let me get my best, guys.
Say that again. You want to draw the gun, get it mounted before you step off the box to activate.
And then reload as
Yeah,
you
but it's
step
not,
it in for the
it's not allowed.
The reason why to do that is so it's trying to stick in one spot.
Definitely.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't see how you could hit a draw stroke that clean, dude, on that first target.
Yeah, you're going to grab the gun, get it mounted, activate it.
You can acquire a
Left,
target as long
right,
as you're not
center.
exposing
Yeah.
1% of your target. Yes, sir.
Yeah. That hurt me. Disappearing targets, man, can hurt you, as evidenced by down 8 on that one.
Who's ready? Stand by.
You're done. Show clear. Thank you. Trigger hold.
Clear. Shooter's ready. Stand by. Thank you. We're clear. Time 7:91. I am clean.
1, 0, 0. Outstanding.
Thank you. Yeah, there's one down, but 7 of them.
That's still the best time,
Oh.
and still
Thank you. That was pretty
Can I
good.
get the next 2 shooters,
Down
please?
1. I don't think I should be on a close one like this, but there's 3 movers. I got a bad draw. That slowed me up just a little bit, but everything else is pretty smooth. You know, I just tried to do it like I can do it every time.
Make ready.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
We got 15 rounds, Vickers count. Concealment required. Start loaded, topped off, holstered, while seated. At the table, facing forward. That is forward. At the buzzer, draw and engage T1. That is T1. With 3 rounds. Then engage all remaining targets with 3 rounds each. There are a total of 5 targets. You have 2 directly to your front. 2 through the door. 1 is a swinger. It appears 1 time. All targets get a minimum of 3 rounds each. You must stay seated. Are there any questions?
Any shooting order on these? I know that's the first.
After that, I don't care.
Any order after that. Are these? What are these over here?
That activates everything.
Okay, so I keep going.
We're gonna see it.
Yeah, perfect.
First half of that course, man, went super smooth, man. Plenty of time.
Did you go to the swing out first?
Yeah, I went to the swinger.
You
I went
think now that you shot it, I
activator.
bet you we could have gone stationary then to the swinger. You think you would have had enough time?
No. No, I don't think so. I don't think I would have had to pull that off.
I would rather do it the way I did. I
Yeah.
got my hits,
Yeah.
and that's what I wanted.
Good, consistent hits. I was clean right up until that extra makeup. But
It's tough going first and second when there's a lot of movement targets, and but you know.
but it was a solid stage, man.
Yep.
Solid stage.
We both shot. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, cool.
Shooters ready. Stand by.
Start loaded, topped off, holstered, seating at the picnic table. Palms on table, feet under the table. At the buzzer, engage targets T1 and T2 with 2 rounds to the body, 1 to the head. Move to low cover at the barrel. Engage targets T3 and T4 with 2 rounds to the body, 1 to the head. Around the barrel, not over. Heads and bodies are scored separately. You must have at least 2 body and 1 head on each target.
Melita Ellington,
The
hold
last one was
Jack.
the body. The first one was one on the top that broke the line.
Karate
So the one on
Hendrick
the-
in the hole.
On the left.
The body?
I floated and I thought I had one out of bicep body. And I got a little lazy and threw a headshot, and I had kind of
The first one in the head broke the line.
Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Yeah, still came in all right. Just a little, like I said, the guns just give me a couple little burps only because it's so dirty. My own fault for not maintaining it. It's like a race car, you know, you got to keep on top of them because we're running right on the verge of blowing up is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, it's my right knee, you know. It's just a tough break, man. When my knee acts up, it cost me. Didn't cost me too bad, but, you know, pain is weakness leaving the body, bottom line.
The biggest thing that IDPA has got going for it that differentiates itself is that it's based directly on self-defense principles. It's not training, but it's a good way for somebody that has a concealed carry permit or just a gun at home to get out there, get some familiarity with their gun, get some confidence with it, and spend some time with people that think the same way they do.
1986, I built this place, and a very good friend of mine who used to run another club, he told me, I need to remember one thing. I'm in the entertainment business, and that's all I do is sell entertainment. So that's what I do.
First of all, good morning. Morning. Thank you for coming out to the Shooting Sports Clinic, and we greatly appreciate your participation. How many of you have actually done one of these clinics before? Wow. Okay, good. Well, for those that haven't, what this is it's Panteo Productions shooting team's opportunity to give back to the shooting sports. Our guys go out there, compete, and they're out there. They don't have an opportunity to really help others when they're on a stage. Everyone's out there, you know, doing their thing. But we always wanted to have the opportunity to help other shooters to better their skills. Now, obviously, while everyone here would probably prefer that we do this clinic before the match, I think Frank Lover would have an issue with that. And so would any other match director. So what we'd like to do, our formula is very simple. You shot the match, you know the stages, you know your scores. Hopefully you guys brought your score cards, score sheets. And what we do is we have our guys walk you through how they feel you should do it or how to better improve yourself. And most of the time, 10 times out of 10, you will see that you actually improve your scores. And you'll be more confident, you'll feel more comfortable with what you're doing. And very proud of these guys. So, to introduce them, Super Dave Harrington. Tom Yost, also known as our Supreme Commander. We have Mark Rettel. And some of you know this young kid who's a little wet behind the ears, but he seems to do pretty good at matches every now and then, Bob Vogel. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide up into 4 groups, okay? Easiest way to do it is standing right here. We're going to divide off into 4, right? And then each instructor is going to take a group, and we're going to do 4 of these stages. You have 40 minutes that they're going to take you through the stage. Then I will come around and wave, and then you'll rotate to the next stage. Pretty much like you were shooting the match, okay? The difference is they're going to talk first, walk you through it, and then you'll do it. Okay? Any questions?
If you're comfortable, load and make ready. We're going hot. I had this set up, but somebody already cleaned it off. Little things mean a lot to me. That's how I had it set up. The reason being, shooting positions, you're gonna have stones, you're gonna have grass. This one was actually set up right like this when I set it up before. Before you go to your stage, look, I walk, I make sure nothing's there, I'd walk over, clear all this crap off, so I'm not kneeling on that. When I'm stopping in certain spots, I'll look, make sure there's not a big boulder where I'm gonna hit. Little things mean a lot, so you really need to pay attention to the details. This stage here is designed by the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in Groton, Connecticut. We used at the Indoor Nationals up at Smith & Wesson. We didn't have the big boat, we just had wood boats, kind of like that. So it's a great stage, you get a lot of different things going on. It gives you a couple different options of how to do it. I fired it one way. If I'd seen Vogel go first, I would have done it the way he did it. Stand by. When I unload my gun, how I do it, I keep my finger out, I grab the cocking grooves, I jack it around how I look, I show to him, and lower it. What you did was this, your finger's over the top.
Okay.
You want to avoid doing, I've seen 3 people get their fingers blown off doing that. Stand by. Hey, after 30 years of doing this, I still get that dread. The thing is, shooter's ready. Stand by. Programming it in, exactly what you're doing. You know, where you're hitting them. I'm seeing myself hitting them in the head, not in the body.
Right.
I'm picturing my gun with my finger up above him when I do that.
Yep, I just skipped to the second act, that's all.
Yep. Pretty simple. Any questions at all?
Years ago, everybody said if you touch something with a gun or use something to brace a gun, it would throw the shot off. Over the years, I really think that's been dispelled as a myth. 3-gun shooting, if you're shooting tactical, how many guys drive that 20-round magazine in the ground to be used as a bipod?
I do.
How many guys run, maybe not the barrel, but they throw that forearm right up, you know,
I
on
do.
something? I think a handgun, you look at Bianchi Cup, they're holding right onto that gun and that barricade as hard as they can. Granted, it's a really tough load, but I've done it. I've come in and drove my gun into, if it's a real tight, the revolver shooter did that.
Yeah.
You boom, put your hands right on there. He had good hits from it, so I don't experiment with it. I don't like to get so wound up thinking I have to do it where I'm looking for a place to do it and taking the time to drive it into it and come back if I don't have to. I'd rather have, especially if I'm going from point A to point B, if this is my last shooting position, not a big deal. But if I here, now I got to pull off of it. So I'd rather just use my hands a lot of times. Cover, there you go. You forgot a target. That screwed you up to where you forgot that target. Second shot in here. You went 1, 2, and took off.
Well, that's why I had the extra round.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you came out here, which was no biggie. But what happened was, when you thought you were going to have to reload this line, wasn't it? You forgot all about that target. Something. So what I want you to do is load up, get your thoughts together, and we'll try it again.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Firing pin stopping it also, so
it could be. Yeah.
Thinking that.
With just a wall and barrels, you guys can do a lot of stuff of going around one corner, around another, just run in the wall, put it on a 45-degree angle, placement of targets. I use a lot of hard cover and a lot of no-shoots in my training. The harder I make it in my training, the easier it is out here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your time. Not a problem, guys.
Appreciate it.
All you fathers out here on Father's Day.
Sure,
Boy,
thank
your
you.
wives must be loving you guys.
My consideration is the lighting conditions inside and outside of the vehicle have the highest impact on my ability to shoot this course of fire well, based on my ability to see my sights and what are the lighting conditions at the target. Okay, to hit that low target, extremely tight between the shelving in the van and the wheel well. Okay, you can virtually point shoot these two targets here. Okay, I actually when I engaged the low target, my first shot hit the metal plate, and I got some serious splashback from the van. I thought it was pretty cool. And if you bend at the waist and just simply lean forward, the seat actually tilts and works to your advantage. Any questions? Let's go hot. You've got to take your time, okay? Take your time. Make sure you've got a nice, crisp side alignment, good picture, and press that trigger clean straight to the rear.
The more experience you have, you get that feel for how can I come out with the best score. You know, do I slow down and do this, or do I speed up and do this? And that's took, you know, years. When one person runs through the stage, I'll talk to them as soon as they finish shooting it, critique them a little bit, while everybody else make sure and go down as soon as I call range clear and get everything pasted. There's only thing I'm going to draw, slide out, and one very crucial thing here, I want to be out far enough that when I'm shooting that first target, I can see the second target. Because if I can see the second target, I can snap right to it and I can shoot that a lot faster. You really need to call the headshots. There's no room for error. If you're a little bit off on your down zero in the circle, you're half a second. A little bit off on the head, it's a miss. It's 2.5 seconds. So it's that's pretty crucial there. You need to go straight down, exact position, and be right there. So I'm exactly where I need to be as soon as I come down into the ground. My lower body is bent. What that does is that allows my upper body to be upright, as close to my natural shooting stance as possible. When you can do that, you're going to shoot better. A lot of guys, if you can't get that low, they're up here like this. Well, what that means is, since we have to shoot underneath the barrel, you have to duck your lower body like this. That's an uncomfortable position, and you're not going to shoot as well. You're not going to shoot as accurately or as quickly. I just know what shot is the last shot before the reload. I know that if I do this correctly, I'm going to fire 2 to the body, and I'm going to be at slide lock on the inside target there. So that way, as soon as I fire that second shot on that body, I don't have to hesitate. I don't have to look at my gun and realize I'm unloaded. I know instantly I do a load, and I get that last headshot. You had your second shot to the body on the inside. Yeah. Went into the barrel. Ah. I watched you shoot up here, and you're a little more, you know, out with your arms like this. I mean, extended. Okay. And down there, you're kind of jacked up around the barrel, which that's just going to cause that gun to recoil and change your you know, the whole shooting cycle. And they had a good reload there. That went right in for you. So, do you know what you had in the match?
It was an 18-30.
Okay. That's Well, that's 4. I don't know what your points down were.
0.
Okay. Well, you're 4 seconds better. Yeah. So that's a big improvement.
My teammates are not just my teammates; they're my buddies. Dave and I have been hanging out for years. A really good friend of mine, somebody I talk to a couple times a week. Same thing with Mark Retto. I've known him probably about 15, 20 years. Fernando Coelho used to sponsor me when he owned Titan Ammo and also Woolworth Clothing, EOTech Clothing. So anytime we get together, not only do we compete, we have a great time hanging out at the pool, talking, just bonding. So, I mean, it's a really good group of guys. Mas Ayub, I don't get to see him too often because he travels a lot doing training. And Vogel, it's always a pleasure to see, you know, the new guy, the hot new guy who, you know, you think you're good till you see somebody like that on the line.
Our gun team consists of myself, Bob Vogel, Mark Rettel, Tom Carpenter, who shot earlier in the week, Fernando Coelho. We have our gun team is a very tight-knit group of nothing less than professional shooters. I failed to mention the team captain, Tom Yost, Supreme Commander himself. The gun team is made up of accomplished shooters, not just in the competitive sports, but also in the professional realm of training and law enforcement.
But I love the guys. I mean, I do. You know, Mark and Dave and Tom. I mean, everybody's authentic. I mean, what you see is what you get. You don't have a, you know, guys putting on a show type of stuff and with certain attitudes. I think we all seem to mesh pretty well. And, you know, this match particularly, we're all staying in the same hotel. It's always nice to hang around with people you know and hang out and just a little bit of the, you know, the social atmosphere. I love it. It's good.
The shooting industry is like a family. We all try to get along for a common goal, just to enjoy ourselves and to bring more people into the sport.
I want to thank all of y'all for helping me do this. All right, the SSP Carolina Cup. Low score for the match.
And the winner of the 2011 IDPA Carolina Cup is Bob Vogel.
I also carry the bail money when we go out on events like this. So basically I'm responsible for kind of like herding cats, babysitting, except for big, dangerous guys that carry guns and know how to use them.
It's been a lot of money.
Good fight. That's Tiger Woods saying don't use my hands up.
I'm in an interview. Call me back.
Chapstick. It's not. You gotta rub it in. It's red. It's Dr. Pepper. Like that. Lipstick.
True. For Fernando to count over 20, he has to be naked, and then he only could get to 20 and a half.
You see where I get the support.
Oh, yeah. Feel the love, baby.
Yeah, oh, I feel it.
After that, I don't care.
Okay. Any order after that. What are these? That activates everything.
I want to do a snake drill with the film crew so they get a little more intimate with us.
Snake drill. Who are these people? They think they're in Hollywood.